what this video looks like on YouTube. What this video looks like in real life. Oh, that's a mess. Alright, so I love needle minders, and if you're watching this video, there's a decent chance that you do too. Unfortunately, I'm also broke, and cute needle minders cost money. Money that could be spent on essential crafting supplies instead. So, what do we do when we can't afford to buy something? That's right, we spend a ridiculous amount of time and money learning how to make it ourselves. Before we get started, I just want to say hello and introduce myself to anyone who is new here. My name is Michelle, aka the Giddy Stitcher. I'm a multi-crafter who mostly cross-stitches, knits and crochets, but also dabbles in soap making, sewing, and hopefully soon a lot more besides. On this channel, I want to share the ups and downs of multi-crafter life, adventures in new crafts, and, like in today's video, experiments bringing together 2 or more of my existing hobbies. So, if that sounds like the sort of content you might be interested in, you should hang around. Just one more quick note today for regular viewers. I have decided to officially move my weekly upload from Thursday nights to Fridays for a host of reasons that I won't bore you with here, but should hopefully result in better videos. So, without further ado, let's get cracking. We've probably all seen those people with a drool-worthy needle minder collection. Unfortunately, this is mine. This tea lover minder that I bought from a local Etsy seller as a treat to myself and to stop myself storing needles in the arm of the couch, and this squizzer needle minder that was a birthday gift last year. I'll put links to both of these Etsy shops in the video description. Now, I'm lucky enough to have a friend with a laser cutter, and I'm unlucky enough to be the sort of person who moves from fad to fad at the speed of light. So obviously I wanted to design some things to be laser cut, but also obviously I didn't leave myself enough time to do that before he moved house, which was our deadline at the time. So while I do have grand plans for laser cut needle minders, stitch markers, and everything else under the sun, what I actually found myself with was only one design ready to go in time. It would be a waste to cut only part of a sheet and leave the rest unused, so long story short, that's how I ended up with about 1 million of these. Still, let's look on the bright side. They'll come in handy for a bit of good old scientific experimentation. So, here's the plan. 4 identical laser cut bases, to which I'll apply the same design in 4 different ways. Minder 1 will be painted and then filled with clear resin. Minder 2 will be painted and then filled with coloured resin. Minder 3 will be unpainted, but then filled with coloured resin. And Minder 4 will be painted entirely white and then filled with the coloured resin. So why resin? Well, it's what we happen to have around the house because earlier this year we suddenly became obsessed with the idea of learning to make dice. Aren't they sexy? I have no experience of working with resin outside of dice, and this plan may or may not be doomed to fail, but it'll probably be fun finding out, so whatever. Since Minders 1 and 2 will be painted identically, I wanted to get that out of the way first. My creative vision relies on having a steady hand and the ability to neatly paint around the raised areas, but it turns out that is not a skill I actually possess. Thankfully, the white outlining really brings the whole thing together, and while it did take a few coats to cover up all of the mess, it doesn't look too bad in the end. These aren't quite accurate to the original design, but hey, I'll take it. Now, as a reward for all of that work, I get to paint Minder 4 completely white, which is messy and fun and was never intended to involve finger painting, but somehow does anyway. No regrets! Anyway, that's all the painting done, so now all we can do is wait for those to dry while I wander off to find the resin supplies. Alright, it's basically resin time. We've got, the white one is still a little wet, so I'm just going to move that out of the way. But look, these ones are looking pretty good. I did a little bit more touching up, but they're fine. I'm excited to see how they go with resin in them, and that's what I'm going to do next. Alright, for this next stage we will need 1 needle minder base, 1 miniature set of scales, a couple tiny measuring cups, a few plastic mixing cups, a stirring device, and of course some resin. Now, somehow I failed to hit record while measuring out part A of the resin, but let's just breeze past that and rejoin as I work on part B. This resin needs an equal mix of 50-50 part A and B by volume, which doesn't equal the same weight of each. So we have a fancy spreadsheet to work out the final values for us. With the two parts mixed, all there is to do is stir interminably for the next few minutes. Okay, so here we go. All mixed up, and as you can see, it is absolutely full of bubbles. Not to worry though, because I'll be using a pressure pot. Prior to buying the pot, we tried various bubble reduction methods with varying levels of success, but now we have the fancy equipment, we get to pretty much just ignore bubbles, which is very nice. Alright, time to fill up Minder 1. The goal here is to fill it up with just enough that it A, doesn't overflow and go everywhere, and B, looks cool. Wish me luck. Let's start with just a tiny dollop and go from there. I saw somebody on YouTube making jewellery with a similar method to this, and she was just sort of guiding the resin around, much as I'm attempting to do here. It did work for her, you never know, it might work for me. This resin I'm using has around a 40-minute working time, so I can afford to just take my time and focus. Usually impatience is my downfall, so I'm really trying to take it slow here. For the purposes of the video, let's speed it up a little. So that actually looks pretty good. I'm feeling tentatively confident at this stage. Let's just get Minder 1 moved safely out of the way. Now what I did is I had a sudden change of heart and went and found another of the blanks, because I'm thinking it would be interesting to just fill this one with the clear resin and see how that looks. The laser engraving turned out so pretty it's almost a shame to have them all fully painted or otherwise covered. So I guess this is actually bonus Minder 5? I'm a bit more confident now, so just going to gloop a load of resin on there and away we go. No fuss, 2 down and 3 to go. Unfortunately, this is where it gets more complicated. These 3 will all use coloured resin, and while ideally I'd have an idea of exactly how much I need of each colour, I do in fact not. So let's just guess. The white paint is still a little bit wet, but I've already mixed the resin, so let's just move that one out of the way for now and do the others first. Cross your fingers that one dries in time. I'll just eyeball a vaguely suitable amount of resin to fill in the blue sections and add a couple of drops of blue alcohol ink. The theory here is that I don't want it to be too dark for the fully painted Minder, since my paint job already came up quite dark. Although I expect that means we'll be in for a sort of muddy brown result on the unpainted one, and something potentially approaching pastel on the white. Only one way to find out. It only just occurred to me at this point that the coloured resin is going to obscure my nice white outline. Oops. And maybe I can paint that back on afterwards, who knows. I've come too far to change the plan now. Onward! Now, the white paint is mostly dry, but there are still a couple of damp spots. I don't want to leave the resin sitting for too long, so I guess this just became a double experiment. What happens when we fill with resin over white, but also what happens if that white is still a bit damp? Answers on a postcard. As soon as I've poured this, you can see that huge difference between this and the unpainted one. This is so blue. It could probably have benefited from being a little bit darker, but I want to keep the science experiment intact by applying the exact same colours to each one. Now, we've got a little too much of the blue here, but don't worry, it's not going to waste. I've brought an old dice mould with me. It's a little worse for wear, and if I'm honest, never worked particularly well in the first place, but I'll dump the extra resin into this D20 hole, and I guess we'll just see what comes out of that tomorrow. Next up, I need to split off a fairly tiny amount of resin that will become our purple, and the remainder will be our grey. I have black and white alcohol inks and absolutely no idea how much of each will be needed, so this is very much an experiment here. I'll start with just 1 drop of black, because black is often quite an overpowering colour. Okay, yeah, see, with 1 drop of black that is already quite dark, so I'm glad I started off slow. I'm starting off with 2 drops of white, which makes essentially no visible difference. At 5 drops of white to 1 black, you can see it's definitely starting to go more grey. Still a little bit dark though, I think. So I'll put in another couple of white drops just to be sure. So the plan, which probably won't work at all, is to add the grey sort of at the bottom of the mountains here, and then add the purple from the top and let them kind of mingle in the middle. Oh, no. Oh, right, see, that was overconfidence in action right there. Luckily, the resin is kind of thick enough that it didn't immediately mix, so I've managed to scrape it off the blue part, and I think it might be okay. I'm going to skip ahead a bit because by now you've probably seen enough of me poking at resin with a toothpick, and also because I'm embarrassed. What am I doing? This isn't my toothpick. You can definitely see against the white that I did in fact manage to mix a fairly pale grey. It just doesn't necessarily look like it when it's in the cup. That's an important note to my future self there. For the purple, I've added 2 drops of the violet ink, but somehow failed to get it into frame. There's so little resin in this cup, it's difficult to mix, and I'm kind of skeptical of how well it'll pour. Oh well. Answer: with great difficulty. But we got there. The place where the purple runs into the grey is more visible in real life than on camera, but I'm just going to try and encourage it a bit with the toothpick, see if that helps. This blue on this minder is bleeding everywhere, and the pastel colours are not at all what I wanted. Still, maybe the addition of a pinky purple will be just what this one needs. What do you reckon? I maybe have just enough purple to fill the rest of this unpainted mess, but it's so muddy and ugly that I just don't really care if we run out and I have to abandon this one. Okay, I've misjudged. It's everywhere except where it's supposed to be. Oh god, and now I've poured it wrong and there's purple everywhere. Oh god, you right. You, purple, go there. You, purple, get up there a bit. I should really make a blooper reel one day. That's that then. Just gonna go back in and try and rescue the white one from all this bleed. Look at those colours though. It's 80s, it's bisexual, I love it. I'm just dumping the rest of the grey into the spare dice mould off screen because I'm lazy. You might not see it go in, but you'll see it come out tomorrow, and that's the exciting part anyway. So there we go. Obviously varying levels of success here, but what you might be forgetting is we have 2 perfectly serviceable clear resin efforts too. After all of this, what's the betting that this one ends up being everyone's favourite? I would not be surprised at all. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is get these into the pressure pot, leave them overnight, and we'll see how they're looking tomorrow. This would probably all fit in the pressure pot just fine, but my boyfriend put a lot of effort into making this little caddy, so let's give it its moment on camera. Ooh. That can just sit in the conservatory overnight and I am off for a well-needed relax. Alright, it is the next day, let's see what we've got here. Cross your fingers. So let me just adjust the camera for you. Here's where we are. We've got kind of muddy, ugly brown. We've got, why is this snow purple? We've got just a lot of bled together colour that hasn't swirled or formed a gradient at all. We've got straightforward painted minder that looks like it maybe came out okay. And of course we have literally just filled with resin that, as I suspected, may turn out to be one of the best. I'm going to get these unloaded and we'll have a closer look. Alright, now I'm not going to say this was a complete success, but also I don't think it was a complete disaster. Let's have a look from, let's say, worst to best. It'll be no surprise to anybody that the unpainted minder turned out worst. It's just so muddy and brown, the blue looks more like green, there are these annoying speckles that it turns out are some kind of imperfection underneath the resin that I just didn't notice yesterday. Dislike. My next favourite is probably this one, painted but with coloured resin. Now, this might be a bit of an unfair ranking because I did say yesterday that maybe it would look better with the white picked out again in paint and not obscured by the coloured resin, so maybe I'll find time to try that later, but for now, here it stays. Right in the middle of the pack we have the white painted minder. You can see here the purple and grey have totally failed to combine in any way at all, so I need to rethink my technique there. Also, you may recall I poured this resin over paint that was still damp in parts, and interestingly, when we opened the pressure pot, it had developed large bubbles around those spots. It's been out of the pot for around an hour now, and the bubbles have mostly gone flat again, so that's kind of intriguing because they were very noticeable and very bad. All in all, I think this one is a success in the sense that the colours are pretty, and I can definitely see a use for this technique in other projects. Just look at it compared to the unpainted version. These will definitely come in useful as reference items for future, if nothing else. In second place, we have the last minute edition of the unpainted clear resin minder. Really glad I added this one, I honestly think it looks great. One thing I will say is you can see here in the reflection of the lights there's almost like a wrinkled skin texture on parts of the surface. I've never seen that with resin before, although maybe it's something that only happens on open projects like this rather than closed mold projects like dice. I'll have to look that up. So that leaves our winner, the basic painted and clear resin minder. All of that effort with the coloured resins for naught. I think this looks great. Quality of the underlying paint job notwithstanding. And the only thing really letting it down is the imperfections in the wood that are giving it some rough texture on the snow caps. If we did another coat of resin, that would probably solve that entirely. The colours maybe aren't as vibrant as I'd pictured, but in hindsight it's obvious that I should have primed the whole thing white and then painted on top of that. Then added the clear resin on top of that. I think that might be the key, so we'll file it away for future experimentation. That said though, this is pretty and I would totally use it as a needle minder. Speaking of which, they're not much use as needle minders without magnets, are they? Let me just grab my Boxo magnets and my very specific brand of glue because it's what all the Americans use and I don't know enough about glue to substitute. Now, let's make one last mess. I'm actually a little bit afraid of these magnets. They're super strong and in a big group like this, they could probably have your finger off. It takes a real effort to peel them away from the pile. Alright, dollop of glue and a magnet on each. How hard can this part be? Yep, I have got glue everywhere. You ever feel like other crafters just make things look super easy and then there's you? Yeah. Ta-da! Alright, I better get all this tidied up because our kitchen is now kind of a bomb site and I will be back to check on them tomorrow. And here we are. I decided to abandon the other two in the end and just finish these three. The other two were lost causes. And as you can see, they are totally functional needle minders. Listen to that great clacking sound. Hurrah! They may not be the tidiest things in the world, but I love them and I'll get better with every attempt. As long as we learn something along the way, the project was a success, right? Now, the original idea was to get to this point in the video and have a handful of beautiful needle minders that I could offer to give away for free. Unfortunately, I can't imagine anybody wanting one of these. Still, if you do and you're in the UK, let me know and I will send you one for free, no problem. You never know, somebody out there might have a soft spot for deformed craft projects. Otherwise, well, I guess my needle-minder collection just got a lot bigger. If you've made it to the end of today's video, thank you very much for sticking with me. I genuinely do appreciate it. I hope my beginner mistakes didn't infuriate you too much, and if any of you out there are resin experts, please do chime in and let me know how I can create a gradient next time. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for more craft crossover projects in future. I will see you next week, and in the meantime, keep making cool stuff. Bye!